Hello, today is Tuesday, October 27th, and this is the 27th chapter of the book of Acts. Those of you who are familiar with this book, this is the day you've been waiting for. We have a shipwreck today. It's very, very exciting. We're almost to the end. This is only 28 chapters. Tomorrow's the last day. However, Paul and friends never cease to entertain us, to enlighten us, and to encourage our faith. So let's dig in. Paul sails for Rome. So he's appealed to the emperor. Festus and Agrippa want to let him go, but he's appealed to the emperor. He's started the process, so he has to go to Rome to see the emperor and to let the process get to its end. And he's known from God, from the message and vision from God, that he's supposed to go to Rome. So there's a lot of details about how they get a ship, where they leave from, how they go around different islands, and it follows geographically pretty well what you would imagine how they would do this trip. So they came to the place called Fair Havens, near the city of Lasea. And then it says that sailing was now dangerous. And Paul had advised them, though. He says in verse 10, I can see that the voyage will be with danger and much heavy loss, not only of your cargo and the ship, but also our lives. So Paul tries to give them a warning, and they ignore him. And Centurion paid more attention to the pilot and the owner of the ship than to what Paul said, and they keep going on. And they didn't put harbor where they should have. And he was wanting them to harbor the ship, and they didn't. And they went out to sea, and then they encountered this storm. So they encountered this storm, and it is right when they sail past the island of Crete. So they sail past Crete, and then this violent wind rushes up, called a northeaster. I mean, that's funny. I was thinking about that being like in the Great Lakes or something. So that's what it's called. And the ship was caught. And there's all these details about weighing anchor and the leeward side, and all the language is very nautical from like boating people. So the narrator changes to be more like a sailor in this part when we're talking about being on the ship. And we run back to, just as 27 begins, we're in first person plural again. This whole chapter is first person plural. Well, we were to set sail for Italy. They transferred Paul and some other prisoners, and they put us all on the ship. So us, we, it's the first person plural. So I don't know, we're back with the narrator being a part of this whole thing. So that they start, like, they're in such peril on the sea that they start, like, throwing the cargo overboard, and they throw the tackle overboard, and they try to get rid of everything they can. And then they hadn't been eating, they were fasting. So Paul says they're in such dire straits that Paul stands up and leads them. He says, you shouldn't have done this, but now that we're here, keep your courage. And he encourages them to eat something. And he says that I'm going to tell you right now that my God said that I am supposed to go to Rome, so I will not perish on this trip. So you won't either. God has granted safety to all who are sailing with you. So keep your courage, for I have faith in God, and it will be exactly as I have told you. But we will have to run aground somewhere. See this language, run aground. That's what happens to a ship. It runs aground. And eventually, of course, that's what happens. So then they're in the 14th night of the voyage, and they're drifting across the sea about midnight. And they suspected they were nearing land, and because they're dropping these measurements and finding that they're like this many fathoms, and they're getting closer to land. So, fearing that they might run on the run aground, they let down all the anchors, and then they tried to escape in uh, lifeboats. And Paul stopped them. He said, um, "Unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved." But the soldiers left anyway. And then Paul told the men that were remaining there to take something to eat. This is when he tells them to eat something, not before. This is when he tells them to eat something. I remembered he told them to eat something. And then he breaks bread with them in a traditional way, like we've seen in the Gospels and also in Acts before. And then they were encouraged. They took some food. They felt good. And there were 276 on the ship. And then they threw the rest of the wheat in the water because they needed to lighten the load. And then the shipwreck. In the morning, they didn't recognize the land, but they recognized the bay with the beach. And they planned to run aground on the shore so that they could just make it in there. But they got stuck on a sandbar, and then they had to swim. Like, it's not like a story. It doesn't sound made up because they were like, oh, look, there's land, and then they just ran aground on the land. That's a great story. They didn't. They got stuck on a sandbar, and then they had to swim for it. So the ones that could swim, swam, and the ones that couldn't swim, they would just hold on to wreckage and just float in, I suppose. And the soldiers were gonna kill the prisoners because they were afraid they'd escape by swimming away. But somehow Paul stopped that. Doesn't really describe how. Paul kept them from carrying this out. That's what it says. And then he told them how to get to safety. Like those he ordered to jump in the water, they could swim, and those who needed to hold on to the debris, and they were all brought safely to land. So Paul saves them in a way. They don't listen to him at first. He probably could have saved them way back in Crete if they'd have, parked the boat until the nor'easter blew over. But they didn't listen to him, and then all this stuff happens, and then finally they do listen to him, and look, it came true. And this is very exciting. There's all this nautical language, and it's first person plural, which it really brings you right into the story. And then they wanted to take us, and then the ship was, and it's just, I think it's a very exciting chapter, and it's at the end. So it's like you've been reading, and now like you have this really exciting event. And it's not the last one, because now they're on this island they hadn't planned to be. Woo! I can't wait to see what happens tomorrow, our last chapter. Hope you have a great day.